So what's the Grape Explorer talking about today? So we are going to talk about France again. One of my most favorite areas in all of France is the Loire Valley. And I'm going to point this out on the map, but I'm going to talk about a little bit about the wine that we're going to talk about, which is called Vouvray. And Vouvray, if you're following our channel, we talk about grapes, we talk about regions. The grape here is Chenin Blanc. It's probably the most famous area of Chenin Blanc in all of the world. We're starting to see more Chenin Blanc grown in places like South Africa, which I think is one of the best areas for Chenin Blanc. They actually say that the Chenin Blancs that they grow in South Africa are very reminiscent to this area right here on the map, which is called the Loire Valley. Loire Valley is pretty big here. So we're gonna zoom in on this area though. This area right here is called terrain, right here. And then you're just going right across here, and this is Vouvray. And this is actually the nirvana of Chenin Blanc here, because you have along the river all the best of the Chenin Blancs. You have Vouvray here, you got Montlouis here. There's also Savigny, there's Bonnezeau. These are all the most fabulous areas for Chenin Blanc. But we're gonna zoom in on this area today because I just wanted to talk about Vouvray, and I wanted to at least spend some highlights here. So Vouvray actually existed since the Middle Ages. Viniculture existed in Vouvray since the Middle Ages, and when the Catholic Church maintained vineyards in the local monasteries, the Chenin Blanc was known locally as the Pinot de Loire, was created in actually Anjou. So if you've ever had an Anjou, that is also considered Chenin Blanc grape. But I've had some experience with Vouvray. At one time, I distributed Gaston Huet's wines in Florida, and became a big fan of Gaston Huet. Well, what they did was they identified the different areas of Vouvray on the label. This one actually says, if you look on the label, it says Vouvray. That means that it is a dry Vouvray. And Gaston Huet would put sec, S-E-C, on the label, and that would identify the wine as a dry wine. But also what Gaston Huet did, which was really kind of cool, at least even today, he identifies single vineyards, which is on the label. He'll put on the label Vouvray, and it'll say sec, and it'll say Montlouis, which is also a single vineyard, to identify the zone. So why does somebody do that? Well, actually, these wines are very chalky soils. And when you dig down 20, 30 feet, you're coming on a really hard, chalky soil. And the vines, believe it or not, penetrate through and puncture the vines, puncture the soil composition there, which is chalk. That actually gets into the wine. So when you smell and you taste this wine, you can actually smell that kind of chalky soil. But the first thing that you smell is orchard fruit. I get nectarines right off the bat when you smell this wine. That's the Chenin Blanc, but it has that honey kind of flavor to it. So you get a little bit of that sweetness from the grape, from Chenin. But what's intriguing about these wines is that you would think like, oh, that's going to be like overtly fruity, like Riesling. No, when you taste the wines, because of that chalky soil, it gives it a bracing, refreshing acidity that just cuts right through the fruit. So when you taste this wine, again, that's orchard fruit. You get apples, you get nectarines, you get peaches, and then you get that acidity, and it hangs with you for a long period of time. You can maintain this wine in your mouth when you're just tasting it for close to 30 seconds, because that's what these wines are all about. They're beautiful wines. So remember, when you're tasting Vouvray, and if you want to try Vouvray, you want dry, it'll say sec, S-E-C, on the label. If you want an off-dry style, they're called demi-sec. And those are usually, a little more fruitier in style because they leave the grapes on a little longer to get that little more residual. And if you want a sweet wine, like the super sweets, they call it moelleux. And that is actually when the grapes shrivel down to a raisin, like Sauterne, and can become great. And the reason why I say great is Decanter Magazine came out with their top 50 wines of all time. And Gaston Huet's 1947 Moelleux was one of the 50. The only two sweet wines, you had Chateau Yquem and you had Gaston Huet's Loire 1947. That tells you a lot. That's world-class wines. Oh, and by the way, if you want a little sparkle in your wine too, they make sparkling Vouvray. Again, those are in the drier styles because they're more tend on the sec. So when you taste those wines, they're beautiful, but they have that natural acidity like champagne. It's the closest thing to champagne, except champagne is Chardonnay on the white side. But when you taste Vouvray, it's Chenin Blanc, and it's beautiful, beautiful expressions of wine. By the way, just a little point, 1936 was the first year that that Vouvray became what's called appellation. See right here? We got appellation, the Orangey, right here, and you've got Terrain. We've got Vouvray. We've got one of the best wines made in France. People don't pay attention to these wines, and guess what? That means that the prices are very, very good. Again, this is a Grape Explorer, always talking about great, great wines.